Hello, my name is Ariel Adamson of Rogue Tech, and this is going to be a Theros reaction video. I'm also known as Kaleo42 on the IMTG forums, if you know me that way. Just going to talk about the weekend, how it went, some of the events, the rares that we got, and just my overall reaction to Theros. First off, going into the events, my top pick as far as color was definitely black, because Adirant Overlord, 6/6 flyer, puts a bunch of puts a bunch of dudes into play that are also in the air. Super powerful and limited. On the way to the first event, I was actually talking to one of the judges, and he brought up the fact that the white promo, Celestial Archon, is always good, whereas the Adderant Overlord you kind of have to have a board position to begin with for it to really make an impact. And I agreed with him, so the first event I picked white, played blue-white flyover, ended up 3-2, so 3-1, and not a bad deck at all, but it was blue-white flyover heroic, so I had a pretty good theme for limited, as flying's always good in limited, and the heroic ability in general is really good in limited if you have the cards to support it, and Mnemonic Wall is definitely the right card to support it. Talk about that later. My next pick was black. I made that pick based upon Thoughtseize, just because that pack that you get that has the promo in it has a rare of the same color, and I realized that the only rares that I really wanted were actually out of black, whereas the other colors didn't matter as much. So I figured I'd just go black from then on, which I did. I went 3-2 with black-white heroic. Didn't quite, got some kind of nasty draws in the last two games. Next event after that I was actually very happy with. Pulled all the cards that support Esper Control. Didn't know I could do it in limited. But multiple kill spells, multiple mnemonic walls to use my spells again, and certain Planeswalker, which I'll mention later, definitely allowed me to play my favorite archetype in limited, which was awesome. Then for a two-headed giant, I teamed up with Danny O. He's basically my polar opposite in playstyle. I'm very out there and creative with my ideas. He kind of brings me back down to earth, but he's very straightforward, so I sometimes get him to think outside of the box. We complemented each other perfectly. We both played black, that way one of us could have two Adderant Overlords. He ended up going black-red control, mostly killing things, and having black dudes in play for devotion, while I went blue-white flyover with a little bit of a control aspect. So with that, we're going to go ahead and go into the rares. Starting off, ended up with two Celestial Archons by the time the day was over, or weekend was over. Really like the card. Maybe not a whole lot of standard applications, but 4/4 flying first strike's always good and limited. We only ended up with one Chain to the Rock. I am okay with that. Chain to the Rock is not a Swords to Plowshares. It's not a Path to Exile. Sure, American Control can make use of it sometimes, but it's still not our instant speed. That's the important part. It's not an instant speed kill spell. Now the one that I'm happy with, and the Planeswalker I was talking about, we ended up with two Elspeths by the time the night was over, or weekend was over. One Elspeth for the two-headed giant, the other Elspeth for my Esper Control. Elspeth's probably most important to talk about in Standard. She's not necessarily a card you play a lot of, which is going to lower her price obviously, but she's still a card you play. Good power, good impact. Abilities complement themselves well, or each other well. Reminds me a lot of Elspeth Tyrell. Definitely doesn't curve the same, but still very good. Her emblem is honestly a little disappointing, but game-ending under most circumstances. So, definitely a card I'm happy to have. For Fabled Heroes, Heroic Double Strike, it's not a Mirran Crusader, but Heroic is really good and limited. I don't think Fabled Hero will see a terrible amount of standard play, but that'll keep its price point low enough that people who just want to do an easy white weenie deck will probably use it. Gift of Immortality was actually one of my pre-order cards. I ordered 4 of them. I'm not anticipating a whole lot of standard play, at least with what we've seen yet, but I could see it in a Reanimator or something that's abusing any of the ETB effects that we have left over from Ravnica, and a few of those enter the field effects that we got in Theros. Also really funny to put on a Burnished Heart elk, or whatever the heck it's called. The dude that you sacrifice to go grab lands, because then you just get it back and you sack it again. Managed to pull that off in a limited game. The card advantage was too much for my opponent to deal with. Next one that I'm excited about, Heliod. We ended up with 2 of those. My opinion, second best god. I am a control player at heart, so anything that sits there that allows you to do something with your mana at instant speed, get value out of it, and not to mention vigilance, so you can be both offensive and defensive at the same time. Really, really like him. Soldier of Pantheon. Probably one of the better rares in the set. 2-1 for 1, good to start with. Protection from multicolor, only getting better, and then you gain a life every time any player anytime an opponent casts a multicolor. Really good. Reminds me a lot of Core Firewalker, but definitely more main board worthy, whereas Core Firewalker came out of the sideboard a lot. Spear of Heliod. I was super excited about this card until I read it a little bit closer. The creatures have to deal damage to you rather than just damage in general if you want to kill them. So not as good as I want it to be, but still good. 3-cost Anthem isn't quite a 2-drop Anthem, but still definitely a decent card to run as maybe a 1 or 2 of. Probably won't see a terrible amount of standard play in the long run. Curse of the Swine. Funny. Really good in limited, really good flavor-wise, good job Magic. However, it's sorcery speed. Killer for standard. You can get rid of a lot of crazy threats regardless of what they are, which is pretty awesome. Takes care of the Blood Barons, takes care of gods, takes care of all of the most annoying creatures right now. However, sorcery speed and giving them dudes is not always going to be in your favor. Master of the Waves? Yep. There's been a lot of hype about this card. I honestly don't like it. I don't care if you have protection from red, a 2-1 does not survive. And if your dudes don't survive without you, what's the point? Now it says Charlatan. Really good card, copying effects, and I say really good because copying effects and doing funny shenanigans is good in Commander. Don't play him in Standard. Please don't. Prognostic Sphinx. This was one of my bombs. I actually ended up pulling 2 of these, a foil and a regular, for our 2-headed giant. Really good. I don't see a terrible amount of standard applications for him because he has a 3/5 flyer for 5. You can probably do more with maybe Medomai. However, working on some Reanimator ideas, because discarding cards at will is a very powerful effect. It's almost as powerful as sacrificing creatures at will. Of course, those obviously aren't good things when your opponents are doing them, but when you have that ability to change your board state and change your hand state at will, it's a very powerful effect. Obviously you have to build around it, but it's still very powerful. Swan Song. Only ended up with 1 of these. Gonna need more. Counter just about everything. Pretty freaking good. Leaving them a 2/2 could sometimes bite you, but casting this for 1 blue seems good. Not to mention we still have Nemagus Elemental, which can just eat it anyways, so you're basically getting 1 blue, 2 counters. So between Danny going with black, me going with black 3 times, and Dennis going with black, we ended up with 5 promos and 2 regular Adorant Overlords. I think the card can be played in Reanimator. Not much else as far as standard. Really good bomb, but again, you're only for limited, but you're only getting advantage out of it if you're doing good already. Ended up with a foil Agent of Fate, beautiful card. Really glad to have it. Only got one. Wish I had more. 3/2 Death Touch is good by itself, and then the heroic ability, whether you can use it or not, still good. Even to just get a couple activations out of it. Managed to use it to kill a monstrous Fleece main lion in limited. Didn't think that I'd be able to handle it, but what I ended up having to do is block. They sacked their dude for favorable effects, and then I had to shoot my own Agent of Fates with a kill spell in order to make them sack the Fleece. Shenanigans got there, so it worked. Got the full playset of Heroes Downfall. That's right, Murder got an upgrade. Really, really liking the card. Got to get in the habit of calling it Heroes Downfall, or at least Downfall, whereas I've been calling it Murder all weekend. Hithania the Cruel. We just pulled it. Haven't really decided what I think of it. 6 mana for a 4/6 Death Touch, not super exciting. Destroying everything that's not a Gorgon, a little bit more exciting. Honestly, can't say for sure. Don't anticipate a whole lot of standard play for it just because it is such a high curve, but never know. Whip of Erebos. This card is freaking amazing. I'm glad they put it in a pre-constructed deck because its price would probably be stupid if you couldn't get it easily. Lifelink, so powerful, especially in limited. And then bringing back dudes, getting your ETB effects, abusing Obsidat with it, because as long as the creature goes to exile, it doesn't care why it's going to exile, so the Whip's replacement effect won't interfere with Obsidat's ability. Just so much abuse waiting to happen. Moving on to red, ended up with 2 Anger of the Gods, obviously going to need more for all of those cheap weenie decks that people are going to be playing, with states coming around in 2 weeks. Ember Swallower, obviously not the greatest card, but I feel you could really abuse it in some low curve aggressive decks, especially with cards like Xenagos and Nykthos that can produce a stupid amount of mana off of very little land, and then just continue to do so. Fire Drinker Satyr, you either love it or you hate it, simple as that. It's either going to be really good or really bad. Just depends on each individual game. Sometimes you're going to take extra damage to the face, sometimes you're going to get in for more damage than you would have any other way. Labyrinth Champion. Don't really see it ever seeing standard play, but in limited it was kind of annoying. Orphros, easily the strongest god, not because he's good, just because his stagnant effect is stupid. Let me shock you, for every dude I make when we have a semi-token theme, via Selesnya in even blue and red have a fair amount of tokens right now as well. Rageblood Shamans, Minotaur Tribal, somebody's gonna play it. But I don't, it's not a Goblin Chieftain. I kind of wish it was a 2/3 rather than a, or I kind of wish it was a 3/2 rather than a 2/3, but still seems good. Titan of Fire, good job on flavor, bad job on design. I mean, 5/6 in red kind doesn't really fit, should be 6/5. Humans have pay red, deal 1. Not super exciting. Whole thing costs 6. I feel like it could have been made a little bit more powerful. Or playable, I should say. Anthosa Hero. Cetacean Hero, yep. We had one of our team play green once and ended up with 2 others just out of packs. Honestly, I despise the card. I think it's okay in limited, but it has very little application outside of that. Arbor Colossus. I wish I would stop pulling these out of freaking prize packs, but you can play it in mono green. It's a good top end, and it curves well into its monstrous, which is pretty cool. especially with flying being a little bit more powerful now. Boon Satyr. Only have one of these. Need a lot of these. The card is stupid. 3 mana for 4/2 flash is just good. I mean, Wolfear Avenger showed us that 3 mana for decent power flash is good. Not always good, but definitely good. And the bestow can only be helpful. It's like it was compared to Gorklan Rampager in one of our conversations earlier. Miscolor Hydras. I have mixed feelings on these, because on one hand I see a Skylasher, which we all saw what Skylasher's price did. On the other hand, I see a open-ended X haste spell that has everything except trample. So these are either going to see a lot of play or not much play. Obviously it depends on how powerful control is. Because the biggest thing, or the most accurate comparison I can make for this card is Gaia's Revenge, like a more versatile Gaia's Revenge, which was definitely powerful in its time, so we'll see. Nelia, God of the Hunt. Haven't really done a whole lot with her. Creatures you control have trample, seems relevant for John, some of the decks that have okay powerhouses that are just missing trample. Being able to pump, you can get your dudes through, or you can just save your dudes, seems relevant. But other than that, I guess you're just running her in mono green, get there as a 6/6. Reverent Hunter, you are really annoying when you do something, and the rest of the time you kind of suck. So if he had any other effect besides getting big, you'd probably see play. Because we've already got things like Ferocious Worm and other vanillas that just get stupid big. They don't see a whole lot of play, except in mono green. Sylvan Carotid, obviously going to need a lot of these. Basic staple. I feel like Wizards is doing a whole lot of functional or semi-functional reprints of cards, just both to open up commander opportunities, but also so we have to pick up new playsets, because this could have been a bird's paradise. Okay, Annex and Cymede. Ended up with 4 of those. One of them's actually from the dual deck, which I actually am not regretting that purchase at all. Really good purchase. Polychronos, Alternate Art Sun Titan, definitely worth it. A couple of other helpful cards, but just liked it overall. Annex and Cymede themselves, 3/2 first strike, Vigilant, playable by itself. It's not as aggressive as it wants to be though. I feel like the Vigilance really makes it want to play in a more defensive deck, where its ability is really calling for you to be extremely aggressive, and putting Annex and Cymede into an aggressive position probably isn't going to happen where you can abuse the effect, just because if you're in an aggressive position you probably don't have a whole lot of spells to target it with. So I feel like the whole card is cool by itself, bad when trying to combine it with other functional decks. Maybe a 2 of Boris aggro. I was so happy when I pulled this. Obviously there's been a lot of mixed feelings on Ashen Rider, but worst case scenario it's a better Deathless Angel. I am sad that it says dies, but also happy that they didn't have another Thragtusk thing where let me just leave field and get stupid abilities all the time. Obviously playing Reanimator, probably not a whole lot of play in anything else except maybe Control. It's pretty expensive to drop to a hardcast, but still well worth it. Maybe even, I don't know if we'll have a higher curve pod deck at some point, but that could be a top end. Daxos. I read him, I liked him, mostly as a commander or in commander. A little bit of standard play maybe, and then I reread him when I was actually attacking with him and hitting somebody with him and realized that he also gains you life. This card is stupid good. I don't think we can expect a whole lot of standard play, but when it is in play, it's going to be annoying. Fleecemane Lion, not only got 1, but got a foil 1 as well. Super happy about that. Really like these cards. Please stop comparing them to Voice of Resurgence. They go with Voice of Resurgence, not instead of. I love what it does to your opponent. Playing a Fleece Mane Lion makes your opponent question whether they need to kill it or not. Because if they don't kill it at any given point after that, it could become monstrous. And once it becomes monstrous, they're not really going to have an answer for it. There's, I think we counted one non-sacrifice way to answer it, and we don't have a whole lot of sacrifice effects right now, especially when green-white is our predominant token producers, who they're going to have enough fodder to sacrifice. Psychic Intrusion. Jank? I mean, it might be relevant sometimes, but I don't think you'd ever play it over Reap Intellect. Reaper of the Wilds. This is the only pre-order card that I pre-ordered that more than 4 of. Actually pre-ordered 6 of those, ended up with a playset here. It reminds me a little bit of Olivia. It doesn't have the same oppressive nature, but it goes in that same slot as far as general power goes. Steam Augury. It's not fact or fiction. Definitely not. Maybe if you have some way to abuse what's in your graveyard, becomes significantly better, but if you're not abusing your opponent's ability to make a good choice, and making their good choices still to your advantage, then this card's just bad. It is that instant, which saves it just a little bit, but not a whole lot. Next, we have an interesting card, which at first I didn't realize was legendary. Triad of Fate. It can be jank, it can be relevant, it can be super powerful and limited, it can be whatever it has enough time to be. Not to mention EDH is going to love this thing. All the untap effects and everything. I think in Standard, without going green, you only have one source of untap that isn't a active treason effect. So probably not going to see a whole lot of Standard play until we get some ways to abuse its abilities, because unfortunately all 3 of them are cap abilities. Next, Tymaret, the Murder King. I've heard Modern talk about him, possible Standard talk. I think he's a funny commander, not necessarily a powerful commander. He's an all-around good card by himself. We'll see how much play he can actually see, though. Okay. Next, we've got 2 Underworld Cerberus. I absolutely love this card. Obviously, manipulating your opponent's graveyard is going to be important. But still really good in shutting down a lot of effects, as well as just getting in with 6 power for 3 mana. Not to mention, he has to die in order to do his little bring back all creatures effect. Managed to get my hands on a Xenagos. Super happy about that. Got multiple people on the team who can make good use of this. Probably going to need more. Everything about him's good. I mean, just all around good Planeswalker. 2 Acheron Horse. Flavor frickin' wins. Awesome. Standard. Probably not a lot. Maybe a little jank play. Maybe if you're abusing the fact that you're getting tokens, or how many creatures your opponents have in play. But for the most part, just odd, limited, funny, but that's about it. Ended up with 4 Colossus of Akros. This was actually just from tonight. Limited bomb if you have the mana ramp. If you don't have the mana ramp, he's a dead card. So I actually had one in my pool. We turned it down just because we didn't have the ramp to get there. But if you've got like 2 Orders of Nelia and anything else beyond that that gets you mana ramp, then definitely run this, because a 2020 indestructible is not going to be stopped, especially when it's just going to trample over everything. And a 10/10 defender isn't that terrible anyways. I think there's a total of 4 ways to answer him in limited. Pixis! This is going straight in my Chaos Cube. I just think it's hilarious. I doubt I will ever see it at Infinite. We only ended up with 3 of the temples. We can expect these prices to go $6, $5. We hit states, and then a week after that, actually a week after game day probably, average price $2 to $3. The only reason these would hold any price is if people don't feel like opening Theros packs, in which case there won't be an influx of them that creates enough supply to meet the demand. Just a couple of honorable mention foils here. Scholar of Theros, stupid powerful and limited. I love it as an extort effect. I don't know if it's curved right for standard. I think paying 3 mana is a little bit high, but really good card. Got a foil Winged Steed Rider. This card is also really good. Heroic flying, super good, getting your counters in, but flying is always good and limited. Foil Aqueous Form. This is important to mention because it kind of replaces Spectral Flight, or at least tries its best to replace Spectral Flight as far as aura builds go. Ordeal of Erebos. Ordeals are all pretty powerful. Putting counters down on your attackers is really good because it puts you above curve in limited. Outside of limited, you'd have to really invest into something that has counters already if you want to abuse that effect. Deal Porphyros foil. Everything's still the same. Nemesis of Mortals. I think this card is really funny, but I don't know if we're going to be able to abuse it too much as of yet, and the fact remains that it really is just a vanilla. It doesn't have anything else except for the fact it's big. So it's Ghoul Tree all over again. Ended up with our 3/7 Centaurs, which never made the cut for any of my decks or any of my teammates' decks. Unlimited. Flamecast Wheel. I thought this would be good in limited, but I always had better things. If you're really lacking removal, it's not a bad thing to run, but still. 2 of the foil lands. Honestly, really like the artworks for all the lands. Now, I have a couple of honorable mention commons and uncommons that I want to talk about for either limited or standard applications. First one is God's Willing, really good in limited, and you can expect to see it in standard as well with anybody who's running heroic effects. Brave the Elements is obviously better, but sometimes God's Willing is going to be a little bit more relevant. Phalanx Leader, we will see these until Theros rotates. This card is so good. I think this doesn't necessarily do the same thing as Champion of Parish, but will definitely be as relevant or as played as Champion of Parish. Hopeful Eidolon. 1 white for a 1/1 lifelink is good, only because it has also the option to give something else lifelink. Lifelink is really powerful since we don't have to worry about infect or very many alternate win conditions right now. I really like this in limited. If you're running white in limited, run him, because at early game he's a dude. Later game he makes your other dude better. Ordeal of Heliod, really good in limited. I don't think it can see standard play. In limited, setting yourself 10 life up is pretty freaking powerful. Divine Verdict is back. It's actually borderline standard playable if you really need that effect and you're kind of limited on colors. But if you have access to cheaper kill spells, use them. Smite is even better. As far as limited goes, good, again, unless you have cheaper kill spells. Dissolve, we can expect as many of these as we saw Dissipates. It's not as good as Dissipate, just because there is a little bit of a sub-reanimator theme. And we still have Angel of Serenity, there's still things that can be problematic, but still good and just as relevant in most matchups. Mnemonic Wall, I'm so excited to see you again. I'm going to bust out all my old copies. Multiples of these in limited means you can run crazy amounts of heroic effects or crazy amounts of control. I had 2 murders in a pool, or Heroes Downfall, and there was multiple games where I cast 5 Heroes Downfall in one game just because of this card. Fate Foretold. I think this one's actually both standard and limited playable. Really good, obviously not probably a 4 of unless you're abusing enchantments in some way, but I think it's hilarious to draw your card, get your advantage immediately, and then have a blocker that they have to second guess whether they actually want to kill it, because getting card advantage is always powerful. And drawing 2 cards for 2 mana is pretty good. Voyage's End, I think we can expect to see a bit of this in Standard. Really good in Limited, resetting into the battlefield effects. We had one of our moments where I think outside of the box and Danny's thinking pretty straightforward. He was attacking with an Adarant Overlord. I had both a Dissolve and a Voyage's End in hand. He knew my hand. They went to kill the Adarant Overlord. He figured I'd counter it because it was the straightforward option there. And instead he saw what spell I put down. It was Voyage's End. Bounced the Adarant Overlord. Played it again. Got the ETB effects for even more dudes. And we attempted to do that a second time, actually, this time with Grey Merchant of Asphodel. But unfortunately, that ended up dying before we could pull it off a second time. Omen Speaker, limited staple. Far more playable than Augur Bolas because it doesn't care what you're playing to be good. Unfortunately, it doesn't put the card in your hand, but Scrying 2 is sometimes as good as drawing a card. And Scrying 3 is almost always as good as drawing a card. Ordeal of Thassa. I think this one's standard playable, drawing extra cards. Really good and limited as well. And just, putting counters down on things, especially when we've got counter sub-themes left over from older sets. Rescue from the Underworld. We can expect to see probably as many of these as we did on Burial Rites, just less decks with them. If that makes sense. Because getting multiple ETB effects off of this is really, really powerful, and we can only expect to see more ETBs as future sets are released. Farika's Cure. This card alone actually made me consider Mono Black Control. Gives kind of that early kick that was missing. Now that we don't have Tragic Slip or... what was the other one? What was another one I had in mind? But 2 damage, 2 life, good. I think we used to have this called Last Kiss, but it costs a different amount of mana. Tormented Hero, really good for aggressive decks. Heroic effect will sometimes be relevant. I like him because he's playable even when you're not using his heroic ability. 2-1 for 1 black. Diagraph Duel, anyone? Baleful Eidolon? There we go. 1-1 Death Touch. Bestow 5 is a little bit high, but it is Death Touch, so I'm okay with it. Really good in Limited, and we may see some in Standard. Probably not a whole lot. Grey Merchant of Asphodel. This card is amazing in Limited, and probably will see play in Standard. 5 mana is a little bit high, so people might be trying to cheat him into play, or at least get multiple activations of him once they do play him. Cavern Lampad. I bring this one up simply because I frickin' love the artwork. If you get a chance, Google search it. This artwork is my favorite one from Theros. Dragon's Mantle. Red having cycling is a little annoyingly powerful. Fire Breathing isn't terrible. I think we've even had Fire Breathing printed for more expensive than this in the past, so that's pretty good. Messenger Speed. Trample and Haste. Finally, we get an enchantment that gives haste that doesn't cost 5. Or something stupid. I've never understood why they print enchantments that cost way too much for the haste to be relevant. But this one's awesome. Fanatic of Mogus. We can expect some of this in Standard. Stupid good in Limited. Definitely not as good as Grey Merchant, but still good. Magma Jet, if you're running red, you have 4 of these. Period. I don't see anything else that you would run if you're running red. Theros' Emissary, really good in limited. 4 for 3/3 that has to be blocked by 2 is actually okay in standard. I don't know if people will play it because 4 is a little bit high on the curve for aggressive decks, but still, 2 for 1s are always pretty good. Crusader, he's either going to be awesome or disappointing. I don't think there's enough abuse available yet, but I say yet. Massive Raid is still a card. Fade into Antiquity. If you pull this in limited, play it. If you're running green. If you're not running green, let's hope your other colors are strong enough to make up for the fact you can't exile. Might see sideboard limited. We'll see. Ordeal of Nelia. This card is broken in limited. Way too powerful in limited. If they go 1-drop and then Ordeal, all of a sudden that 1-drop is above curve for anything you're going to play and will eventually get them 2 lands. If you're lucky enough, you have a Hero's Downfall that you've just wasted on a 1-drop. And that's if you're lucky. Because you're not going to be able to kill it with anything else. Because this thing is going to outcurve you. Probably play in standard. As people get more comfortable with basic lands, we'll probably see a lot more of this. Warrior's Lesson. I love this kind of effect of drawing a card when a creature deals damage and putting it on 2 for 1 is, well, a 2 for 1. Potentially draw 2 for 1 mana. Seems like green always gets the best draw cards, and blue just gets most of the draw cards. Commune with the Gods. Grizzly Salvage has a good friend now. We'll see if it sees play. Horizon Chimera. I really like this card. It's a 3/2 for 4, which isn't great, but it has Flash, which makes it a little bit better. It has Flying and Trample, which is always a weird combination because Trample is almost never relevant in the air. But when you draw a card, you gain a life. So you can leave your mana open for counterspells or whatever shenanigans you're planning, and then if you don't need them, play this and automatically gain a life, essentially. Seems okay. Not great, but okay. I'm hoping that I can find a good spot for it. Akron Hoplite. We can see this almost as much as we see Phalanx. If it wasn't such specific mana, then maybe we'd see it more than we saw Phalanx. Getting a pump for all of your attacking dudes is pretty awesome, because he's on average going to be 4 or 5 power dude. Spellheart Chimera. If Nivix Cyclops combo deck hadn't become a deck, this probably would have flown under the radar, but because everybody has that kind of in the front of their mind, we can expect probably a lot of these right out of the gates. I'm going to throw spells in the yard, get dudes with Pyromancer, and make Cyclops and this dude big. Seems good. We'll share all the tokens. Cleric. I really like the artwork. I don't know if it's because it has the Nyx border or if the artwork itself is cool, but I like it. The soldier token that everybody saw, if you notice, it is followed by more soldiers, so it is strictly meant for Elspeth as well as the Evangel of Heliod, which puts a bunch of dudes into play. But I noticed something when I was looking down here at the number and trying to organize them, that there's another white token. So I looked through all my cards and I got only one of this other white token. And this other white token is absolutely amazing. It might be a little bit hard to see because this is a low quality 2:30 in the morning video, but that is a soldier crawling out of the Akron horse with a few other soldiers sneaking into the village, or sneaking into whatever polis they're in the middle of the night. They went that far with the flavor on the Akron horse, and that is why it freaking wins any flavor contest. bird or swan. I like bird tokens. I don't think I've seen a bad artwork on a bird token. Elemental. Thanks to this elemental, I realized that Master of the Waves is summoning horse elementals. Probably would have never realized what kind of elementals they were until I saw it. This harpy I want to call a fairy because the artwork makes it look like a fairy. We will probably actually see these. Red soldier. He looks mean. The boar. Second place flavor contest. Actually thinking about taking an X-Acto knife to a few of these and making a 3-dimensional boar token. Don't know if I'll actually do it with the boars, but if I get enough of them, I might. Satyr token. This one was actually a little bit hard to come by, but ended up finding it. I like the artwork. A little bit dark. The golem is amazing. Danny actually said it reminded him of Immortals, and it definitely does. Looks very Immortals, the movie. And then, of course, nothing's complete without the set's emblem. So, those are my general reactions to Theros. I think I conveyed most of the ideas from the rest of the team. I was the only one to do 4 events. It has been a very long weekend. I woke up 9 a.m. on Friday. It is now 3 a.m. on Monday, and I've gotten a total of 8 hours of sleep in that period. But as you can see from the stack of rares and general knowledge gained throughout the weekend, it was well worth it, and I don't have to work until 3 tomorrow, so weekend well spent. Glad I could get this video out though. Almost went to bed without doing it. But let me know what you think. You're always free to follow on imtg.com. If you don't have an iPhone to download the app, then you can go to imtgapp.com/forum and comment there. It's obviously set up so it looks like it's meant for an Apple device, but there's a lot of good discussion there, and I'm going to be posting a lot of my personal ideas there as new decks start coming out. And yep, check it out. This has been R.L. Adamson, aka Kaleo42 with Rogue Tech, and hope you enjoyed our reactions to Theros. Have a good day.